Welcome to Final Approach. Delta just did one of the most incredible things we've ever seen in the aviation industry.
That's right. Here's some context. So basically, about a month back, Alaska Airlines announced their all-new, brand-new route to Rome.
It was huge for them, right?
It was huge.
They're going to Europe.
Yes. A month later, I was in Turkey, you were in Florence.
I remember. I saw
Delta announces a flight to Rome. And additionally, as a cherry on top, a flight to Barcelona.
Which reports hinted was going to be Alaska's next route. So this is all crazy. Delta doing something crazy. We're to get to it. But we first wanted to tell you what else is on tap because we got a pretty stacked show for you today. Miles O'Brien, CNN aviation analyst and PBS NewsHour science correspondent, will be joining us, as well as Frank Sebastian, the director of the Seafair Airshow. We've got team coverage for Seafair this season. It's going to be awesome. We'll be on the ground interviewing the pilots, doing everything, getting the best coverage we can. We're going to get to that interview in just a little while, along with that interview with Miles. We're going to be talking with Miles about that saddening Air India crash and the ongoing investigation to what happened, specifically involving that fuel cutoff switch. But let's start with Alaska and Delta.
All right. So here's the reason why Alaska wanted to fly to Rome. The thing is, no one's flying to Rome from Seattle.
Nobody's flying to Rome.
It's an untouched market.
It's a great way for them to get into that southeastern European market because it connections to Greece, right? Other places in Italy, Portugal, Spain, right? It unlocks a whole new world.
But there was no competition. Alaska is new to the European and just the global market in general. And now at the beginning, we said they should go to London, they should go to Paris, but there's so much
other airlines are going to London, right?
And
Virgin Atlantic might pull out of London. We talked about that earlier. You can go find that video there, too. We talked to Virgin Atlantic. So far, they're not pulling out, but you never know. And if they did, do you think Alaska would have gone to London?
I don't think so. I think...
They already have British as a one-world member.
Here's the thing. Delta is super duper powerful everywhere. This is an Atlanta-based airline. But they're
most profitable airline in the world.
So dominant, most profitable,
amazing,
arguably the best in the entire country. But
made Atlanta like the global hub.
Exactly.
Great for the city.
Now Alaska has to compete with them.
They have to compete.
Have 20% market share at Seattle, right?
Delta does.
Delta does, yeah. Alaska has 50, but they aren't used to this global market. Of course, they did acquire Hawaiian Airlines, and that is one of the reasons.
Delta has 25% of the global market share from Seattle, and Alaska, you could say virtually at none at this point because, well, if you even want to count Alaska, you'd have to count their one-world partners. So, yes, Alaska virtually has no market share out of Seattle, and Delta has a lot, but when we think about it, Alaska also has lots of the people. Alaska has lots of the population out of Seattle. 50% is a lot. And yes, a lot of people fly on Delta from Seattle, but not even half as much as Alaska flyers do. So this is going to be interesting because, yes, Delta has the advantage internationally. We've seen that loud and clear. Alaska knows that, and Delta obviously knows that too. What we haven't seen, though, is if Alaska's passengers are going to stick with Alaska for these long-haul flights. I just got back from that trip where I was in Florence, flew Delta, connected in Paris, where we were for the Paris Airshow, flew Delta back and forth from Seattle on an A330-900 Neo. It was a phenomenal experience. I will say, obviously, none of us have flown in the Hawaiian 787 that will soon be Alaska operated and hopefully branded. It also looks very cool, but it's hard to compete with that because we have virtually no clue of what that is to offer. We've seen the seats, but that's it.
Yeah, they've talked about announcing stuff later this year.
Some new global experience.
The question is, who's going to win out on this route? Alaska, they're dominant in Seattle, but Delta, they're dominant as an airline international.
It's the million-dollar question. It's not even the million. It's a multi-million-dollar question because Delta, right now, you could say they have the upper hand. I mean, I wonder if Alaska, my question to you, Lou, does Alaska regret not expanding two routes at the same time? Yes, that's a lot to, do at once. For an airline like Alaska, right? Not as big of a presence as Delta. Delta, yesterday, announced a couple new routes, LAX to Hong Kong, or not yesterday, a couple days back. LAX to Hong Kong, LAX to Chicago, lots of flights to Chicago. They made it seem like virtually nothing, if you ask me. If Alaska did that, it would be top of the news. Seattle Times, everywhere. And that's what we saw for that international route. So, it just, I don't know. Do you think they regret not having two routes?
I mean, when you really think about Delta stepping on Rome and then adding Barcelona on top, that's like the cherry on top, right? They're really asserting dominance in that European market. And Alaska, they're desperate to expand. They spent $1.9 billion, right? to acquire.
It's a great idea. Alaska's doing everything they can, and they're doing the best job. And it's important to point out that we can't even decide on a clear winner because the flights haven't even started, and they will not start until next May. But the reason why we're talking about this right now is because it is so heated. The battle in Seattle is taking shape, and the center of it all was, does SeaTac have enough space to accommodate everybody?
Yeah, of course, SeaTac. I mean, we've seen how SeaTac, the utilization of the airport is being changed. Usually, most international heavy jets would land on that 1-6 left, 3-4 right, but now they're changing it up. It's like we're seeing more of an international market come out of Seattle, mainly because Alaska Airlines is starting to step it up.
And the World Cup next year. I mean, I literally just realized this while you were just talking about that. I was just thinking, right? There's a lot of football in Europe is like the center sport. As he pours his Icelandic water. But now they have an easier way to get to Seattle, and they don't have to go through Heathrow, which could, in some ways, be great. Could, in some ways, be bad, a nightmare. I don't know what your thoughts are on Heathrow. Leave us a comment, though. I'm curious. I flew there once.
I think the deciding point of who wins out on this route is how well Alaska Airlines makes that 787. Because it comes down to the luxury of the airlines. Because Delta, it's a great experience. They have in-flight entertainment, great service, just a great experience overall. Alaska, they really acted like they're really gonna do something big on those 787s.
A new onboard experience.
We're talking about Alaska Airlines here. This is the budget airline out of Seattle. It's like
I would call them budget.
Of course, not anymore.
I mean, let's flash back. What is that 3 years ago now?
3 years ago.
Nat Pieper, now president of One World Alliance. I'm trying to remember now. What did he tell us?
Hybrid.
They're a hybrid airline. So Alaska's kind of in between budget and luxury, you could say.
Yeah, but the thing is now they're becoming a luxury airline after the acquisition of Hawaiian. But Delta already has their 100-year anniversary, right?
That's this year, yeah.
This year. So they really know what they're doing. Alaska Airlines, this is something totally new for them.
It's uncharted territory, but when you think about it, it's a great strategy all around. And I think it's about time that Alaska expands globally. It's long overdue for them. You know, they've secured every possible route on the West Coast. They're flying most routes from most large airports, every pretty much large airport from on the East Coast to the West Coast. They're flying in most airports, even regional airports on the West Coast. They've expanded. They have squeezed out so much of America and also North America too. They've gone to Canada. They've gone South America. They're now in Costa Rica. They needed to expand. They were bursting to expand. And this is a great way because they ultimately saved Hawaiian Airlines. But what's interesting to me to think about now is how do Hawaiians feel about this? I mean, they were like, I'm telling you, the Hawaiian locals were so psyched about their 787 aircraft. Because they were excited that more tourists would come and fly this new plane. They were excited that they can go, more seats, more efficient, they can go and travel different places. But now they're hearing that all the 787s are pretty much not going to be even flying to the islands, and they're going to be stuck with those old A330-200s, which we can all agree are pretty not great airplanes.
I think Hawaiian Airlines was the perfect Hawaiian airline. But Alaska's really positioned everything after that acquisition in Seattle. We're not seeing new expansions out of Honolulu or wherever. It's only in Seattle. But I have to mention, think about how dominant Alaska Airlines is in Seattle domestically. When you want to fly everywhere, think about the other airlines. We have Frontier, Spirit. I think Alaska still wins out.
And Frontier is now at Paine Field too.
Exactly. Frontier to Denver, right? I think Alaska still wins on that route, even though Frontier's that's their hub, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and then Spirit. I don't know. You know Spirit?
Yeah, they're going to Las Vegas and.
I think Alaska still wins that.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean,
and then it also comes to United and Delta and American.
I mean, I will say I took United to the East Coast last year, and it was a pretty great experience. Everyone was nice on board. Flew the 757, which was awesome.
But I still think Alaska will win out on those domestic routes. But now we're thinking internationally.
This is the question right here. It's who will win, and I feel like now we're sort of repeating ourselves, so we can't do that anymore. So, what do you want to talk about? like based off of this? Like I'm trying to I'm trying to think of something.
Let's go back to Hawaii here.
Okay. Oh, back to Hawaii.
Well, we talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
It would feel weird for a Hawaiian branded and Hawaiian experience flying from Seattle to not Hawaii, right?
Oh yeah.
So Hawaii, like I said earlier.
Well, they're gonna rebrand everything.
Yeah, they are. But what happens to Hawaii? Hawaii is a huge market, like one of the top vacation spots ever, and Alaska has an upper hand here.
I mean,
but they're not utilizing it.
Joe Sprague, the CEO of Hawaiian Airlines, told me back in February that they're not gonna forget about the Hawaiian culture, and he was very, very passionate about that. Like even calling their headquarters the Koa Like they're
but is
keeping
Alaska
the Hawaiian
Airlines
tradition.
really doing that?
That's a really.
I don't think so.
I think they are in some way. I mean, I feel like they could have. You know what? That's a really good question right there. Is Alaska doing all they can to keep the Hawaiian tradition alive here? I mean, at some point you have to realize that it would not work to fly a Hawaiian Airlines branded plane in Italy, let alone from Italy to Seattle, not even Hawaii. Like, at some point, you gotta realize that's not gonna even take shape. That there's no way in heck that's
Yeah, but look at what they're doing. They're taking all the 787s, and now they're Alaska-branded airplanes. And these were planes that were designed, or initially, they were gonna fly from Honolulu to, like, Seoul and Tokyo, but now they're flying from Seattle to Seoul and Tokyo.
New Alaska Airlines offer. Now you can buy one, get one free on a bunch of... No, I'm serious. This is actually happening. You can now, on flights from Seattle to Kona, Seattle to a couple other, I want to say it's Maui, I don't know about Honolulu, also other West Coast cities, Los Angeles, San Diego, same deal. You can buy on these select routes, buy one, get one free ticket. Sounds like a deal. Alaska Airlines, you could call, or Alaska Air Group, you could say, has literally, like, dominant control over all of the Hawaiian Islands right now. It is great. Southwest just can't come in and do that. And now Alaska is coming in. They have all these routes. I will go on the radar and just see the amount of flights. You'll see an A330 next to a MAX 9, next to a 321. And it just works out perfectly for them. There's so many flights to the islands. And so I don't think Alaska's forgetting Hawaii here. I'm going to tell you right now. They're not forgetting them at all. In fact, they are putting Hawaiians at the forefront of what they do, even though they're expanding more. And the reason why they're expanding more is also because Hawaiians can now fly to Seattle and go to Europe. They can go to Asia. But they can also go to Asia from Honolulu.
Hawaiians would have just gone to Honolulu, which you talked about. Those 717s, they're just like, it's like a bus ride.
They would have never flown from Honolulu to Rome. That would have never happened. It's because of Seattle.
When we're thinking Rome here, but Rome aside, just out of Hawaii, there was a huge market to Asia. From Honolulu. Remember the A380, the ANA A380? That was like a huge thing from Honolulu to Tokyo, I believe. And our lights just turned off. But
I'll try to troubleshoot them. Keep talking.
I think the thing is, Alaska is using the Hawaiian A330s, and they're using those to fly from Seattle to Asia, like I said before. So I think this gives an opportunity for other airlines to take the Hawaiian market. Like, think of how big this market is. And Alaska, it's also about publicity.
Look how big, but it's not infinity. The market is ending at one point. The market will never keep expanding to Hawaii. There has to be some sort of ending. And in my opinion, airlines have done everything they can to fly to Hawaii. And Hawaii is not a business market for airlines. It is a leisure market that is 100% seasonal. And airlines know that making profit off of Hawaiian flights is only going to happen by season, and it's not going to happen year round. So they know that they cannot get continuous growth from those.
But it is still a huge market, and Alaska does have to hold on to those people, because if Alaska isn't focusing, when they announced their Rome route, it was huge. Like, boom, we're going to Rome. Boom, we're going to Seoul and Tokyo. Totally. But if they announce, like, a Hawaiian route, kind of, like, let's say from a different area, not Seattle, we wouldn't get that boom we always thought. It's not, like, Hawaiian Airlines' thing anymore.
Yeah. I think it still is Hawaiian Airlines thing. The fact that they did not completely buy out Hawaiian and instead now have it sort of as a subsidiary. I mean, they sort of did buy out Hawaiian, but they're being really thoughtful about what they're doing, you know. When I was at their office, I saw that Next up to come into that boardroom or wherever we were was Andy Schneider, the VP of People for Alaska Airlines. So you can tell that people from Seattle are voyaging to Hawaii to meet with people at Hawaiian Airlines. I'm sure Andy Schneider and all those people were probably meeting to discuss like people integration, like how do you integrate the Seattle population with Hawaii? Like a lot of this new stuff within the merger. I'm sure that's what they were discussing, and that's all my opinion. I don't know any of this, but I think that Alaska is doing everything they can to not leave the Hawaiian brand behind, but they know that there's some limit to the amount of focus that they can have on Hawaii, and they know that it's not too much because they don't want to anger their Seattle travelers either. Because if you're a Seattle traveler, let's say you're going skiing, and everything you're hearing now is all about Hawaiian Airlines. Like, look, we're going to the snow. We're not going to the beach. Like,
yeah.
There's a certain limit to how much they can squeeze out of Hawaiian Airlines, in my opinion. And that's why they need to expand to Europe. And I think it's a really great idea. And now they're competing with that. We sort of sidetracked off to Hawaiian and.
I know.
That's
I was
totally
thinking
fine.
about that. But here's the thing, like, how much can you squeeze out of Hawaiian Airlines? They're not really squeezing stuff out of the airline anymore. It's the aircraft.
Oh, yeah, totally. This is 100% different than that Virgin America merger back in 2016. They got that for the routes. And that was a really strategic merger because, unfortunately, they ended up selling off all those planes, which I think they could have kept using, but that's their decision. That merger was all for the routes, and that was genius because it led Alaska to expanding rapidly along the East Coast. Overall, great idea because if they hadn't merged with Virgin America, they most likely would have never merged with Hawaiian because they needed the East Coast routes to solidify them as a solid American carrier. And now they're completely dominant of the Pacific region. You could say even part of the Eastern region they have a little bit of control on, not Eastern, but East to West transcontinental routes. Yes, they do have a decent amount of control on those routes.
Yeah, and here's another question. How much can they squeeze out of Seattle? Are we going to see another big hub develop elsewhere? Like, you were even talking Rome.
We will. No, we will. 100%. This is a great segue, okay? Yeah, we're finishing off our Icelandic water here. The lights went out, so it probably means we should get ready to welcome Miles O'Brien momentarily. But PDX, Portland. I'm going down there tomorrow. This is a really, really, really interesting opportunity here. From now on, this is all from research I've done and personal opinion. Alaska will be expanding domestically only from PDX, unless you're seeing seasonal flights. Alaska's not going to expand from Seattle unless they cut other routes for seasonal flights. You're going to see them expand to like Vail and all these other places like for the winter and etc. And you might see them expand summer routes, right? But they're only going to have to cut routes and cut flights to expand new routes. I really don't see them adding any more large amounts of domestic flights. From now on, they will be growing domestically from PDX. And this is all part of a multi-year, action plan from Alaska to help solidify Seattle as their international gateway. That's even how they're going to be putting it right now. So Seattle's going to go global. And what are the two places feeding into that? Hawaii's going to feed in. I was just talking earlier. Radar showing a bunch of flights going Hawaiian Islands to Seattle. Every morning when I check that, it's always straight to Seattle. And then you will see Portland. Unit Blue. Alaska flies a lot of flights from Seattle to Portland every day. Way too many in my opinion. But it's all part of the shuttle idea. So you will fly. Let's say you're, trying to fly from D.C. D.C. prices to Seattle are going to get increasingly higher. You can fly to Portland, have a half an hour connection, make your flight, and be shuttled back to Seattle, and another 45 minutes later. It's all part of their plan, and they will expand more. And this is a really great opportunity for them to expand from PDX, because it will serve the Portland travelers, it will serve the Seattle travelers. Seattle travelers like, it's only going to take a hour-long flight to get there, and then we'll just connect, and it will be a breeze, right? It's all part of an opportunity. SeaTac is going global. Portland is where you will continue to see the domestic routes, because there's not a whole lot of international flights, long-haul international flights for Portland. Yeah, you got British. I don't think Emirates flies there. Maybe Qatar. I don't even know at this point. But Portland, domestic, SeaTac, global, and Hawaiian Islands are going to feed in to both.
So are we seeing Alaska kind of move down this west coast? Because I also think there's a limit to that. Like, when you get to LAX...
No, they're not going to go to LAX.
No, I'm just saying, you can't. There's not that many options. Portland's market is small. Like, you don't see a lot.
Exactly, which is why they're using it as like a transfer.
That is a great opportunity, but you can only go so far. Portland's market is small because Portland doesn't get as much traffic.
Yeah. You don't need to go. You can say you can only get so far, right? You don't even need to go very far at this point for Alaska. They just need to ease off the traffic at SeaTac. They know that. Alaska 100% knows that SeaTac is getting crazy hectic, and they have. I'm highly saying that this is most likely happening behind closed doors. They are talking to SeaTac officials. They're talking to the Port Authority, and they're saying, like, look, we have way too much overcrowding. This is what the port's probably saying. We got way too much overcrowding going on here at SeaTac. You got to ease some of your flights, and then Alaska's next plan would be, PDX, right? Perfect idea. PDX, you can fly into PDX, quick shuttle over to Seattle, like a breeze. And, the Sea Central Terminal at SeaTac is working really great. They're really good. Ramp up, everything's moving according to plan very smoothly. You're flying in. The Sea Gates is where it's at. You'll rarely see a delay there.
Yeah, they're moving smoothly right now. But really think about the future and what's happening. Even Delta, let's go back to Delta here. Okay. Now they're expanding out of SeaTac. And who's to say another airline's not going to jump in and expand out of SeaTac again?
If an airline tries to jump in, you will see them expand out of Portland. I will guarantee that. You will not see a lot of airlines coming to Seattle in the next couple of years.
I wouldn't say that.
Domestic airlines. Unless, because they know it is so heated right now. They know that the market is Alaska Air Group, because that includes Hawaiian, and Delta. They know that. Because when an airline right now, if I'm an airline, let's say I'm running, let's pick an airline. Pick an airline. United? Spirit? Just no. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. I already hesitated right there because it's not going to work. These airlines will not be able to get in on the action right now. SeaTac is overcrowded. Alaska has control. Delta has lots of control. SeaTac is like sold. It is booked out for the next day.
Yeah, but I don't think Portland is like the alternative.
It's not a viable replacement, but it's their only option right now. Because if they tried to build a new Seattle airport, that would take years, cost way too much taxpayer dollars, and it would be a total ineffective way to reduce the traffic for the short term.
This is kind of weird, but do you think you can fight fire with fire?
Yeah, I don't even know what you're trying to say.
Like, what if an airline just comes in and puts a ton of routes, and the only thing Alaska or Delta can do is stop?
Well, I think both of those airlines are prepared. Delta obviously has lots of experience when dealing when people come into their routes. They operate heavily out of JFK. JFK is like every airline goes to Kennedy. Every airline goes to Los Angeles, LAX. So I think Delta's used to it. I'd say Alaska's used to it as well. I think they'd be fine if another airline would come in, because what other airline is going to try and go from Seattle to Rome? That's my question to you. There is none. United will not do that. United will go to will take you from San Francisco to Rome, or from Newark to Rome, or from Houston to Rome. That's where they will take you.
But Max, guess what? How much can you squeeze out of Rome? There's so many, what if we're talking about somewhere else? Barcelona. What if another airline beats Alaska to Barcelona and it's Delta versus United, let's say? Then what happens?
Well,
because
then you could say they're screwed. I mean, we're doing a lot of what ifs here, and I feel like this is something we have to talk about further down the road, because right now we're doing a lot of hypotheticals. But what I will say is most likely to come is seeing PDX, more routes from PDX. Yes, it's not a viable replacement. It is their only option. What we were sitting here, say 3 months ago, talking about was Alaska using Portland, a lot of different airports that start with the letter P, using Paine Field as a replacement for SeaTac. No, apparently that's not happening. I'd say that that's the best option. If I was at Alaska right now, I'd try to talk to Portland. Maybe they already have. Maybe they're not able to. But I think Alaska's place, did I say Portland? Alaska's place is Paine Field when expanding from Seattle domestically. If they're trying to expand more domestically from the Seattle region, it's got to be from Paine Field. Otherwise, they're going to Portland.
Guess what?
What?
How much can you squeeze out of Paine Field? Think Frontier is also going to Paine Field, and this is not as big as an airport.
So Paine Field has a multi-year plan.
If SeaTac doesn't have enough space, Paine Field has 10 times less. There's a limited it's limited. You can't.
Yeah.
expand as much as you want from Paine Field, and you still need SeaTac because SeaTac is super important for both international flights and domestics. Like, think about connecting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that we can talk about this. We don't want to talk all about it now, right? Because we got lots more to discuss today.
We can do like a part 2 episode.
I know. I think we need to do a part 2 episode. This is getting quite lengthy. Sorry, Miles and Frank, that you're watching this, and your segment is probably at like the 20th minute of the episode. We clearly have a lot to talk about on Final Approach today relating to Seattle. We both live here, so I mean, it's like, it's our place. We got to talk about it. On that note, I think it's time to bring in Miles O'Brien,
yep.
CNN aviation analyst and PBS aviation and science correspondent. Miles, welcome to Final Approach.
Gentlemen, good to be with you.
All right, so let's just dive into this. There's so much speculation about what went wrong here. The plane was airborne for just a matter of seconds, but what do you think? We're still super early on into the investigation with this preliminary report coming out just days ago, but what could explain both of these fuel switches being found in the cutoff position shortly after takeoff? And is there any evidence that points to a potential cause?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a pretty picture. Just as a preface, as you guys well know, in the world of aviation, we have this expression, the rules are written in blood, meaning, when these accidents happen, all of us collectively spend a lot of time trying to figure out what happened, not out of macabre interest, but because it's the way aviation becomes safer. We find mechanical flaws, we find procedural flaws, we find training issues, crew rest, you name it. Those things come to light as a result of these accidents. And incrementally over time, we've created this amazing, safe way to get from point A to point B against all odds. The fact that we're up, 5 miles above the surface of the planet, approaching the speed of sound, watching a movie, and it's about the safest way to get from point A to point B is truly an extraordinary statement. But what we, in this case, what we have found and what is leading us to a very sad conclusion is that it's almost certain this was a deliberate act. So those fuel cutoff switches, they are right on the center console. They're there on the center console, which is very prime real estate, as you know, for the reason that if there is an engine fire, you want to be able to douse those engines quickly. Now, but you also don't want to inadvertently turn them off and put them in the cutoff mode. And so they are safeguarded in 2 ways. You have to pull up on the spring action, and once you put them into place, they latch in place. So it's up and latched into place. So the idea that you could sort of casually hit these by mistake and move them from run to cutoff is kind of inconceivable. And so what happened was everything about on that flight data recorder, that 787, shows an aircraft that was operating perfectly fine, no mechanical issues, no other squawks that we saw whatsoever. But then shortly after takeoff, one and then sequentially right after the other, the fuel cutoff switches were manually put into the cutoff position. And what backs this whole scenario up, that human hands did this with deliberate intent, is a cockpit voice recorder exchange. We don't know which pilot is talking, but one says to the other, "Why did you just do that?" And the other replies, "I didn't."
And if there was some, sorry, but if it was, not one of the pilots doing it, you wouldn't see them saying, "Why did you do that?" Right? It would be more like, "What?"
This is the second stream of evidence, right? And so we know it's all but impossible to inadvertently move these switches. There's no service bulletins, airworthiness directives, anything about these switches that would indicate there's a problem either to that individual aircraft or system-wide. The switches clearly were moved with intent, and then backing up that idea that there was intent, is there this exchange between the crew? So we are left with this just sickening, sad conclusion that for whatever reason, one of those pilots intentionally cut off the fuel to those engines, almost certainly knowing what would happen. And at that altitude, just after getting into the climb phase, no time to relight those engines. Although after 10 seconds, those switches were put back into the on position, the run position, the engines were beginning the process of a restart, but there was just not enough altitude or speed to make that happen.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I remember that the left engine had started, but the right engine took a little longer.
I think you're correct on that. One of them was further along in the process for whatever reason. And even if one of them had been able to reignite, but I mean, literally, this happened right around the same time when you'd expect the landing gear to be stowed, right almost in the same sequence. And so there really wasn't enough altitude there for that to occur. So horribly sad circumstance. And I've done a little bit of homework on this. I counted, if you count this one, and you count MH370, which is still a controversial claim among some people, although I firmly believe that was pilot action on that one. I can count 9 incidents since 1982 where the flight crew took deliberate action to cause the crash of an aircraft. And that the death toll from all of those incidents is over 1,100. And so circling back to where I begin, the rules are written in blood. We've done all these things over the years to improve the systems, the aircraft, the training, but trying to improve what goes on between our ears isn't necessarily the province of aviation. It's the human psyche, and that's a hard one to come up with procedures and ways to address it. Except that we need to pay a little closer, more formalized attention to pilots and their mental health, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, and I know several actions are being taken to prevent these incidents that are intentionally caused by pilots. I remember the one where the pilot locked one of the other pilots out of the cabin. Right? Yeah. What actions are specifically being taken to prevent these in the future?
Well, you'll remember you're referring to Germanwings, and there's been a couple of incidents, by the way, where a locked out flight crew has been involved, but Germanwings most notably. And the first officer who was left alone on the flight deck on that one had we now know had troubles, was dealing with mental health issues, but that did not come to the surface. The airline was not aware of it, nor were his fellow crew members. And so subsequent to that, many airlines instituted a policy that no single individual could be on the flight deck at any given time. In other words, if someone needed to go use the restroom, another member of the flight crew, a flight attendant, would come in and sit in as a way of guarding against that kind of solitary, suicidal, homicidal action. But believe it or not, since that time, prior to this incident in India, airlines had kind of relaxed that idea and that rule. Many airlines had. And, I think it's probably a good idea. Of course, in this case, it wouldn't have mattered, would it?
Yeah. And just based off of that, right, I'm just looking here at page 5 of this preliminary report, and it lists the professions of the people that are working on this crash and the investigation: experienced pilots, engineers, aviation medicine specialists. And then you find aviation psychologists. That really stands out.
Yeah, that's a tell, isn't it? You don't normally see that among your subject matter experts as parties to an accident investigation. And so, I think this is good. I mean, a couple of things that, clearly this is not a systems thing. We're not going to create fuel cutoff switches that can't be turned off by the pilots. We have to have that capability for an emergency, right? So, you don't want to make it impossible for a flight crew to respond to an emergency, right? By putting in constraints on they're putting limitations on what they can do. So in the end, we have to trust the people who sit at the pointy end of these metal tubes, right? I mean, that's a fundamental, almost sacred tenet of aviation, this trust that we have as passengers in the back with the flight crew, that they have good intent. And it's very difficult to come up with a set of rules around this, except to say, perhaps more formalized approach to mental health for pilots should be inculcated across the board. As you well know, the one thing a pilot never wants to do is admit to anything that might ground them, right? And that's their livelihood, their passion, their love, their mortgage payment. And if you come in and self-report a mental health problem, that would be the risk that a pilot would fear. And so there's a trap there, and we've got to get around that somehow.
Yeah, and just, we're talking all about pilot error here, but real quick, the preliminary report that the FAA had issued back in 2018 about a potential issue with the locking mechanism on the fuel control switches on that 737 aircraft, which is not 100% similar to a 787, but it is using a similar design, you could say. Yep. Was this specific aircraft inspected for a flaw like that?
As far as I understand, there was nothing that they said in that report about the maintenance records. This might be information that will come later. But and yes, I suppose I'm having a hard time coming up with a scenario where that's in play, where you lose, both switches in such sequence, the confirmation with the cockpit voice recorder, and then the switches being turned back into the run position. None of that adds up with any sort of defect with the switch. But, it's just like anything with investigations. You guys well know, you don't want to put the blinders on, right? You want to open yourself up to any possibility. It's just that this scenario, it doesn't feel like that.
Is there any reason where these fuel switches would be turned off? Like if there's any scenario within a flight where they would be turned off due to like safety reasons or anything?
Well, it's interesting because one of the early things that I was thinking about, I went down the road initially that, they didn't have the proper flap setting. And I obviously have been proven wrong on that one. But the other one that I thought of was, well, if they did have an engine fire or an engine out, the procedure on an engine fire is in fact to move that switch to cutoff. That's why it's right there, so close to the throttles. You want to be able to get to it quickly if you've got an engine fire. But there's no evidence in the flight data recorder or the visual evidence of any sort of problem with the engines. And there are scenarios. We have had crashes in the past where in the heat of the moment, you have an engine fire on one, and you pull the fuel cutoff on two, and you end up with neither engine operating. And that has happened. That was one of the things I thought of, but there's just simply no evidence that happened in this case.
Wow. Yeah, we will see. The full report is expected not too long from now, but, in these preliminary reports, they'll give us the stuff, and it's sort of our job to sort of piece them together. And I'm sure you'll know that, as a aviation analyst. Miles O'Brien, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
What a great pleasure to be on with you guys. Happy to join you anytime, and keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. Miles O'Brien, CNN aviation analyst. Thank you.
Welcome back. That was a great interview.
Yeah, Miles O'Brien's an awesome guy. Thank you again, Miles, for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah.
So, I think we got to do a little a post-interview debrief here, because this is quite the report, quite the incident. You mentioned, it containing stuff similar to other incidents we've seen.
The German wings. And that really surprised me. They feel so different. Like one is 737, right?
But they're so similar at the same time.
And he mentioned 9 other incidents if we count MH370, which we don't really know much about.
We don't know really much about. But he shared his opinion on that too, which is quite fascinating to hear.
It was actually. But
let's dive back into this. This is the preliminary report.
9 similar incidents, and it really tells us, and this is in the past 40 years, right?
Yeah. The first sign, sorry to interrupt you.
It really tells us how big of a problem this is. Like, after 9/11, we saw so many different things be implemented.
Oh, so many.
But not a lot of stuff about mental health. Most of those were after German wings.
That is a really, really solid point right there. I feel like that there's got to be something happening soon. In my opinion, I feel like if this were to be if this happened in the United States, there would be much more different measures. I will say, the AAIB, the Indian Aviation Investigation Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. Sorry, butchered that one.
You made me say that at the very beginning.
Yeah,
I was not.
They have gotten numerous groups involved. They've gotten the NTSB involved. They've gotten the Canadian version of the NTSB, the Canadian Aviation Authority involved, and they've also gotten the UK's Aviation Authority involved. Many other countries as well. the reason why all these people were invited in, well, the NTSB, so always for these investigations, they'll invite the origin of the, I was trying to type this out last night in a script and it just did not make sense. They'll invite, like, the manufacturer's origin of where they made the plane. Just in simple terms, where the 787 was built. So,
which is?
U.S.
U.S.
So that's why the NTSB got involved. There were, I believe, no U.S., or maybe a few, I'm not trying to see, don't quote me on that, at least very few U.S. nationals on that plane. Lots of United Kingdom nationals and Canadians on that plane, and that's why their own individual party got involved. Not anything to do with the aircraft, more specifically the people that were on board.
Because they were flying to Gatwick.
Yes, they were flying to London's Gatwick Airport, and there were numerous Canadians on there, probably connecting, or if they were going to London. So yeah, that's the lay of the land. NTSB got involved. The AAIB did reject help from the United Nations, which I thought was very interesting.
That's actually
a lot of scrutiny has been under Air India recently. There have been photos surfacing of that cabin before takeoff. There have been photos surfacing of their similar 787s. I will tell you, it does not look that great.
Oh, wow.
It looks, after watching those videos, if I'm being totally honest here, I was not very surprised with what happened. I mean, I think this, based off of what we're talking with Miles about pilot error, right? But, I don't know, it's shocking. The cabin is in horrible condition on those Air India planes. Apparently, they are redoing everything, at least repainting all those planes.
Yeah, we're obviously seeing a lot of stuff happening. I mean, after every crash.
I liked what you were talking about mental health, and I think this is really important. I think a lot of pilots out there would agree. We're not pilots. I mean, we've both flown planes before, but not in the... Yeah. That was a good flex right there.
Yeah.
That was a really good flex. All right. No, but seriously, what do you think?
I mean, it really shocked me, like I said, how similar this is to other incidents, while it feels so different. And there's always, like, after those 9 or 8 incidents, we've seen more precautions taken against mental health, but it keeps coming back again and again. And there's literally not much we can do about it anymore, because
Absolutely.
We can only control this to a certain extent, because it's not always, like, symptoms don't always show, and the tests or whatever they do to control, they're not taken that often, so we can't control this as much as we can. So I really don't see any, like, viable solution as of now.
No viable solution. It's quite sad, honestly, because there's nothing we can do about pilots' mental health. I mean, lots of pilots are working overtime, lots of hours.
Yeah. So I'll leave us on this note. I think what will probably happen is you know those fuel control switches, right? Mm-hmm. That's what was turned off. I think there will be some system that stops them from being turned off at a certain, while flying, if the engines aren't working. Or maybe there will be some, like, override system that you can catch before they're turned off. Because, like, those were you just pick them up and turn them off. Of course, the airplane, it can't accidentally happen, but it's just so easy to turn them off. Yeah. And they're so destructive.
And to my knowledge, this is the first time something like this has happened, at least in a large commercial plane like this. So what I'm curious about, usually when these happen, it does not happen again. I will say, like, 2 Boeing 737 MAX 8s crashed. That happened twice. And then we finally saw stuff happen. And that's still talking about to this day. Like, still, like, legal battles over that to this day. But what really intrigues me is there other systems in the cockpit that, yes, we're not affected on that flight, but are at risk of being affected in some certain way.
Yeah, there's a ton of buttons that can just, like, cause a bunch of mayhem, right? Easily. Like, remember the Alaska Airlines magic mushrooms thing?
Yeah.
That guy did the engine fire thing, right?
Yep.
He
just tried to, but the pilots did not let him.
Of course, but the pilot clearly let him. It's not that hard. It's just right there. So we'll definitely see something taken, like, you know, the landing gear. When you're on the ground, you can't retract.
Yeah. Something
like that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Last thing I will say is I was somehow invited into the jump seat. I'm not going to specify the airline. I was invited into the jump seat mid-flight over the Swiss Alps in Europe on an Airbus A318 aircraft, which was truly astonishing. I sat in the jump seat, and right when I was right there, I was thinking that exact same thing. I would never do this, never, not even think about doing this. Although I did think about one thing, and that is how that Alaska pilot that was sitting in that jump seat, that yes was on some sort of drug, and how he did that, how easy it is to do. I could have shut down the engines. I could have. My hands could have reached it. And that really scares me.
I think we'll leave you at that. Let's move on to our next interview.
Yep. Now we're going to be joined by the director of the Seafair Airshow. So happy you can make it, Mr. Frank Sebastian. Frank, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Final Approach. Joining us now, Seafair Airshow Director for 2025, Mr. Frank Sebastian. Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get started here. The time is sort of ticking here. We're getting down to the wire before the amazing Seafair Airshow gets underway. So can you talk to us a little bit about the preparations that you're doing right now to prepare for the next couple weeks?
Sure. Right now, we're kind of bringing a conclusion to our 7-month-long preparation period to get ready to host not only the Blue Angels, but the other airshow acts that will be here for the Boeing Seafair Airshow. So it's a kind of a sprint to the finish line right now to get the infrastructure in place at the airport, work with the FAA and other government agencies to secure the airspace, and also working with the individual teams, which are bringing aircraft here to look at scheduling, look at the dynamics of their performance, and then all the other aspects of that, such as housing, meals, cars. A lot of moving parts go into this to host the event.
Let's talk TFRs for a second. What's in place for Seafair Weekend that pilots should know about?
Sure. Pilots will see probably in a couple of days 2 TFRs publish. There is one that extends from the surface to 16,000 feet that extends for 5 nautical miles around a center point in Lake Washington. And that's used for the Blue Angels, the other military jets, and everything that is a high-speed operation. And then we have a smaller TFR, which is surface to 5,000 feet for 2 nautical miles around the same center point. And that TFR overlies the race course. That's where we operate our smaller civilian aircraft. We have drones that operate in that airspace, as well as helicopters that are both doing a demonstration, but also there for, safety and rescue purposes.
So how will we see this air show impact just general traffic at SeaTac and other airports in the Washington area?
Well, when the large TFR is active, so the 5 nautical mile TFR, that effectively closes the airspace over Paine Field and over Renton Airport. So those airports, while they're still open for ground operations, any flights are limited to emergency or medevac or something of that nature. As far as SeaTac, we have a couple things that have to fall into play. One is SeaTac needs to be able to operate in a north flow. Which means the aircraft are, landing to the north and departing to the north, because that TFR, which extends over downtown Seattle, requires that they make almost a 90-degree turn to head out over Puget Sound to avoid coming into the TFR. We work with air traffic control to sequence aircraft coming out of SeaTac so they can make that maneuver and try to minimize the impact on the flying public for that. It's kind of choreographed to make sure that we're not delaying aircraft that are coming out of SeaTac, but there may be some slight delays as you have to limit runway availability and, again, making those airspace maneuvers that are very congested at that time.
So are there any new acts or premium experiences that have been introduced for the 2025 Air Show?
We have a number of new things this year. First off, we will have Melissa Burns, who is flying the Edge 540, which is an aerobatic aircraft, who's a new performer to us. She's been flying air shows for a long time and also flies a 737 for her day job. She'll be doing not only an aerobatic routine, but we'll do kind of a hydroplane, boat, and airplane demonstration where they race to a certain point. and things of that nature. We also have the BD Microjet coming, which is a very small jet. It gets towed behind a car. And if you think about the James Bond movie, the one that they had in some of those, it's that little small, 10-foot long jet. Those are new to us. We have not had those here before. We have the Air Force F-16 Viper doing a demonstration, and that has not been here for a number of years. And then, of course, returning, we have the Blue Angels and their F-18 and their C-130. We have the Marine Corps F-35 Bravo, which is the one that's capable of stall. Coming back from last year, it was here for the first time. And then we have a C-17 from McCord Air Force Base, returning from last year. And then this year, we'll have a KC-135 doing a demo that was be over the lake, kind of simulated what they do in a refueling, which is the mission of that aircraft. That's new to us. We have not had that here previous. And then we have the PBY Catalina, the 1940s flying boat. That has been here before, but we'll be looking at trying to do a water takeoff, which we have not done before. So it's a flying, aircraft that's totally amphibious. So we'll have them as a boat for part of their demo and then an aircraft. And then to wrap things up, we'll have a demonstration by the Army utilizing both a AH-64 Apache, which will be doing a combat capabilities demonstration. And then there'll be a Chinook CH-47 that comes in. They'll open the back door, and some Special Forces Rangers from Joint Base Lewis McChord will helocast, it's called, where they basically come down a rope off the back of the helicopter and into the lake, where they'll swim to a boat to simulate what those guys do in just a regular operation for them.
So there's definitely a lot of cool things that we're going to be able to see this year.
Oh yeah.
Where are the best spots to have the best experience and have the best view of these aircraft?
The best spots, of course, are within the Genesee Park area and Lake Washington Boulevard, which is in the Seafair footprint, all along the shore of Lake Washington on the Seattle side, from Lake Washington Boulevard, from probably up at Mount Baker all the way down to Seward Park. The aircraft are centered basically kind of straight out from Genesee Park in the middle of the lake. That's the center point. You'll see a large barge out there. That's their marker. The smaller aircraft, such as the Edge 540 and the Microjet, they actually operate over the same space that the boat races occur. So that is like right in front of Stan Sayers pits and right off of the beach there. That being said, pretty anywhere that you can see that area south of the I-90 bridge and north of Seward Park is good viewing.
Real quick here, can you, obviously lots of big names this year performing. How do you secure handling these aircraft and these headline performers every year?
The process is actually 2 years out. In fact, we just recently submitted paperwork for the 2027 air show to the Department of Defense, where we make a request for the demo teams, such as the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, as well as the other demonstration aircraft from Air Force, the Marines, the Army. And that's a process, like I say, that has a 2-year lead time that goes through the Department of Defense. For the non-military aircraft, we have a convention that occurs with the International Council of Air Shows. It happens in December every year, and which Seafair is a member of ICAST, as it's referred to. And that's where most of the North American air show sites, as well as most of the civilian performers and military performers, all kind of show up in one place. And a lot of deals are made at that location. We obviously look for, what is going to be the best demonstration, the most inclusive demonstration that we can have across all communities. Some people like the jets, some people like the vintage aircraft, some, different likes. So we try to get a little of each in that. And then there's a lot of, kind of say deal making that does occur. Another air show, such as in Hillsboro, Oregon, they may have a performance coming from the East Coast, and we make agreements if we can both support that aircraft. We'll have them in one market, bring them to another market, and share travel costs, things like that. And a lot of negotiation happens. with the military, of course, while, the demonstration teams can be procured and they do operate, years out, for those scheduling, some of the tactical teams, they don't necessarily know what they're going to be doing. And those kind of come to us about, 120 to 90 days out.
Wow. And finally here, the 777-9X is supposed to be making an appearance this year.
Correct.
Yeah, so is that a first timer this year, or has it been there in the past?
It's been here one time in the previous. It was a slightly different variant of it. But that'll be appearing on Sunday, and they'll basically do a flyby, do a tight turnaround, do a 360, come back around, as more of a high-speed pass, and then depart back to Boeing. That's scheduled for, I think, 3:15 or slightly after 3 o'clock, and right ahead of the Blue Angels flight.
Well, we'll be watching. Frank Sebastian, director of the Seafair Airshow. Frank, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. If I can help out any further, just let me know.
Thank you. All right, well, the festivities have begun. Seafair will get underway very soon. I mean, it already did with those awesome 4th of July fireworks over Lake Union. The Torchlight Parade coming up next week. You don't know what any of this means.
Missed them.
Yeah, he missed both of those. And yes, the air shows on Seafair weekend. Genesee Park is the best place to watch, as you heard him say. For now, though, we will see you at Seafair weekend. We will have lots of exciting coverage for you here on Final Approach, so make sure to check back with us. We will be talking to pilots, he mentioned that stunt pilot. Oh, Oreo, all right, cheers. He mentioned that some of the local stunt pilots there, we will be talking to them. The hydroplane drivers, we will give you full coverage as your leading aviation provider for Seafair weekend. Yeah, the Oreos are good. Oreos are good today. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Final Approach. We'll see you next week or next time.